Good evening and welcome to Views with Joyce Waddell. I want to thank you for joining us this evening. We're talking with Frank Coley as we talk about the way things were, as we look at our past, and as we look at how the past tells us about our future. It's often been said, you can't move forward successfully if you don't know where you've come from. Frank Coley is an ex-police officer, and he is well versed on things in the past of how we lived and how we live in such a way that we were survivors in the face of adversity. And many of the things that we did back then are things that we've brought to the future. We brought them forward. And so he has collected many things that remind us of life then and how life is now and how the changes predict where we're going to be going in the future. Sometimes we just can't see the future. In fact, when we look at the things that we're going to talk about today, you can't even imagine that today they didn't exist. So thank you, Mr. Coley, for sharing.
And thank you so very, very much, Senator, for welcoming here. I certainly do appreciate the opportunity to talk about some of these bygone pieces, if I might.
Now, where do you keep all of this?
Well, that's a question you have to ask my wife, too, because all over the place, somewhat all over the place. I have many of these pieces I've been able to display at the house. Yes, I've been able to shelves. These pieces, many of them are family pieces, pieces from neighbors and that sort of thing. So,
but they're near and dear to you.
Yes,
they mean something. The pieces have meaning to you. It's an experience, and it tells a story in and of itself. And that story is in your mind, in your experience, and this is what you bring forward.
Well, that is so very true, because the past has to mean something in an attempt to go forward. Maybe it was William Faulkner, who said something to the effect that the past is an arbiter to the present and then maybe to the future.
Mm-hmm.
The past means something. It's very important.
Okay, let's look at our first item and what was it used for? How was life back then?
Well,
do you remember? Did you experience any of this?
I definitely remember and experienced a number of these pieces because giving thought to the fact that my grandfather Allen Coley, was born a slave in 1860. These pieces a number of these pieces were passed forward.
He was born into slavery.
He was born in
1860, but he didn't stay long because the Emancipation Proclamation came out in 1863, 1865. Slaves supposedly were freed, but many of them weren't free then.
Well, that has been an argument going forward also. So there were many changes that had to be made, and we're still adjusting.
And some people didn't want to be free because they didn't know where they were going. They didn't have any money. Mm-hmm. They didn't have a passage. Mm-hmm. They had nothing. So where are you going? Well, what are you going to do?
That very same thing exists today.
Really?
In a degree. Yes, ma'am. There are many people, while not slaves as such, but we have...
And a different kind of slavery.
And a different kind of where do we go now? It's a different kind of where do we go now in 2018. Yes, ma'am.
Okay, let's look at the first item and how significant it is to where life was then and to life today.
Well, remember...
what is this?
Remember, that is a nutcracker. That is, in fact, as a matter of fact...
Do you have this today?
These are nutcrackers, and they do, in fact, work today, just as much so as they did in the 1800s when they were made. This piece being older and an original piece, this piece being a vintage piece, a copy of an original. Actually, it was a nutcracker here. You take your pecans or your various nuts and you will put it in the mouth of this dog. You would put it in the mouth. You would bring the handle down and then you would crack the nut.
That's too much trouble.
Well, see, before the fast foods and supermarkets and that sort of thing, we had to do it that way. And it was family. This being a nutcracker also,
What would you do with it when you finish?
With the nut, the shell, or the
any of it.
Well, the nuts. My goodness, you would
pan you put it in.
That was the thing that you would do. You would separate the shell and the innards, as the family referred to them, to those pieces that existed after the nut was cracked. You would take the nuts, you would put them in jars. There were a number of things you would do. Fruit cakes. You would parch, what they call parch, P-A-R-C-H, them in a stove. You might put a bit of sugar on some of them. You might put honey on some others, and you use them for those were your snacks. You use them later on for fruit cakes. Oh, they were just great. I have a 5-gallon bucket of nuts that I'm going to crack. Yes, ma'am. Yes, ma'am. And share them with my senior friends, some who are in their 80s who just can't go out and pick them anymore. It's just, I take great delight in being able to do that. I'm going to kind of start here.
Okay,
and
that makes sense.
Okay, I'll start this way. First, let's do this. The items here, Charlotte Mecklenburg is a wonderful, it's a very, very great place. I'm very proud to be here. I'm a retired police officer, as the Senator has said before here, and I have no shame at all in having served. We have a wonderful opportunity here, and I hope that we continue to do some police community projects so that we can get closer to where we have been on some matters. But these shoes here came from a family along Independence Boulevard. Right about now, there's a Bojangles in the area, and a part of Central Piedmont is there. The shoes here were in the care of a Poe family, P-O-E. Mr. Henry Poe is one of the names that I can recall or relate to these, to their area and ownership. But if you see here, Senator, look at the shoes here, and you can think here that these shoes were cut and they were expanded to accommodate the growth of the child. Now, that is a sad and a pitiful situation if you think about it now, because you wouldn't want to.
But they're good leather, aren't they?
They were good leather
Excellent
then.
leather, aren't they?
Excellent leather then.
They were white. I'd love to have me a pair of shoes like this.
Well, I think,
and I cut them and put my feet in them.
Well, I don't think you'd I think as a child.
How old was the person? This is very like a doll
This
shoe.
was an infant. This was an infant. And so we're thinking here about the economic situation, the circumstance of that particular family.
Yes.
Now, I'll say that I saw this in Charlotte, but I saw a lot of that similar to that, and even going barefooted where I came from as a child in the country in the eastern part of North Carolina. Right along the same area there, it was in the 400 block, if I don't make any mistake, of East Independence Boulevard, and these numbers were handmade numbers that were on a wall of a property in that area. If you will see here, an individual hand stamped these numbers, and this would have been either the 114 or the 411 block of what is now East Independence Boulevard attached to that.
Now, when you go around with your information,
yes, ma'am,
your materials, do you allow people to touch it?
Well, these items can in fact be touched.
Sometimes
certainly it is advised.
Because people want to see how they work, and then they start manipulating it.
My preference is that hands-on be allowed whenever possible. There are times that I would ask people to handle them with gloves, especially if there are papers and things of that nature. But for the most part, items here are metal.
Why would they handle with gloves?
Well, because the acids from the hands, that sort of thing would deteriorate. It has the potential to deteriorate papers, especially, and they're already fragile. Many of the items that you would see that I would bring out relative to this era would be from the very, very late 1700s, 1800s, and they are fragile.
Like in the African American Museum in Washington, D.C., they don't allow people to touch that.
Oh, no, and for reason.
Do they?
Oh, no, you could not. Here, even locally, the Gantt Museum, the Levine Museum.
You can't touch any of that.
You don't want people touching. You don't need their amino acids on all of
acids
those
from their
items.
body.
You don't need those items on
We'll get on the
product.
on the items.
No, you don't need them. You don't need them on the items. I'm going to swing here. Being from the country myself, I am country.
Did you own a farm?
Yes, ma'am. My father and my grandfather owned a farm, a very large farm, 160 acres.
That's a lot.
But they lost that during a large portion of that during the Depression, and we lost the last of ours in the 60s because we could not hold on to it for reasons that we could not hold on to those. But I'm going to talk to you.
Does it still exist, and what has happened to it now? Can you not go back and get it?
You can go back, but sometimes it's very, very hard to get. It's very, very difficult to get, especially given thought as to how it was lost. The laws in many instances were set so that it made it very, very difficult. Economic situations and status and of the time made it very, very difficult to go back to get some things that were lost. Mm-hmm. But we have dreams of maybe acquiring some portions of those areas, and I think that's a possibility. Mm-hmm. But coming from the farm to Charlotte, North Carolina, I love this place. I'm very, very proud of Charlotte-Mecklenburg because Charlotte-Mecklenburg is so much, in so many instances, like home. When I say home, Wayne County, North Carolina. There was a salvation of so many of the customs in this area that related to experiences that I had from home. Here, people were doing some of this when I came to Charlotte. This is a
paddle?
It is a paddle, and it might have been incorporated not only in lard, L-A-R-D, making.
Yeah, where you kill a cow.
A
hog.
Yes, okay, well you say hog like where I come from. We say hogs, but hog, yes ma'am. We would use the large pots, and we would steer the fat as it cooked over an open fire, and this was used for steering the pot. You just had to, over a period of time, and also
big black pot, right?
A large black pot. We had a 40-gallon pot that I still have.
So that's real.
This is very, very real. This was handcrafted by my great grandfather. It was passed along, and it has been from the 1800s forward. It is a piece, and you see here, this piece is very well preserved because it's been in a lot of lard, and the grease from the lard.
How do you maintain it? Do you have to polish it or something, or put something?
Have to wipe it occasionally. That's all you do. That's all you would do to a piece of this type. Farmers from the area that I came from, similar to some farmers in the area here in Charlotte-Mecklenburg, farmers walk with staffs you hear from the biblical times and coming forward. But practically everybody at that time, during those eras, you walk with the staff.
What year was that?
Well, my dad carried a staff during the time of 1960s. My father carried a staff.
That was indigenous to that part of the country, that part
to the world.
To
the world.
For a farmer to walk with the staff like a shepherd?
Yes, ma'am. It's very, 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 very much so. Because if we're walking along, and if there is a reptile in the path that might be dangerous to you, or anything that's dangerous to you, you have the opportunity, not necessarily to kill it, but to move it out of its way. Had a grand respect for nature. You understand here.
So you wouldn't want to kill the reptile?
Well, you don't kill everything. I mean, everything is not made to be killed, especially time, love, and those gifts that God and nature provided for us. What we're often doing when we're displacing those creatures is we're making a way for ourselves, and we are not giving regard to why they were there.
You're destroying
anyhow.
your environment, aren't you? The ecological environment
You are definitely doing that, and
that provides a balance for us.
The There, a very, very important word, balance. It's not all about how much money you can have or how much land you can own at one time. No, it's about sharing the resources, the areas, the people and nature.
Well, where does this staff come from? A tree?
This staff came from alongside of a fence. This one grew up alongside of a fence. This is sassafras. This is sassafras.
A tree. Sassafras is a tree, isn't it?
It's a brush, yes, ma'am. It grows into a tree. This one grew. If you see here, you see a piece of wire in there.
Well, you can make some of them now and sell them, can't you?
Well, and yes.
And people do, don't they?
You can, yes, you can. And I have given most of the staffs that I have made to friends who walk because it's just a thing. I have a number of people in the neighborhood who walk the neighborhood or at churches that I have lectured, and I have made staffs for them. I'm going to just ramble.
Would you make some staffs for schools so that children can know what it is and how they use them and see what they can do with them?
I long for the opportunity to do just similarly what you're talking about here, to talk again.
Let them make them, show them how to make them.
how it is done, and to while away some of the time while you learn some things and appreciate more about this gift of God and nature. These pieces are, this piece, for instance, someone might admire it now. Many times before, it would have ended up as a piece of firewood or something. You have to see a bit further along to think what you might be able to do with the gift that is naturally provided. Okay, now I'm going to talk. As I said, I'm going to ramble across this because I know time is of the essence.
No, it's not. We have nothing but time. You go ahead and share with this audience. They want to know about this. This is history.
Okay.
This is about our people. This is about where we have come from. All people, everybody, white, black, red, green.
Yes.
So it's about people in general, our life, how we lived, and how we lived back then. That brings us forward to where we are today. We had to have the staff because it evolved to something else today, didn't it? It started with the staff, just something that you walk with. Evidently, you have something that's more modern day that's doing the same thing that staff did.
Well, I tell you here.
It must be a gun. I don't know what it is.
Well, I'll tell you, we have come to the reliance of guns. While they
walk
important,
now they wouldn't walk with a staff. They walk down the street with a gun, I guess.
Well, and my goodness, 2018, that is something to think about. How far have we really advanced ourselves? If that's what we have, if we have to think now. Every person walking the streets armed, and let's not go there.
Okay, we're going to talk about
staff. Let's not go there because the thing about that is that's
another thing.
It's a very complicated.
Okay, we're coming back with Maxwell House. I remember Maxwell House.
Maxwell House here, and you said something before. You talked about a thing of diversity. Oh my God, what would it be like to live or to attempt existing in a society that was not diverse? This came from a Caucasian, a white friend of mine who was 92 years old and who knew that I was very, very much into things of primitives. And he asked me to keep this piece. A gentleman by the name of Bob Davis out in the Pineville, near Sterling community, I became a very, very friend of his, a good friend of his as a police officer in the area. He's country, I'm country. We stopped in, we vibrated similarly as tuning forks. Mr. Davis used this as this is a drinking tool. He had a well that was dug into the ground with stones around the base of it and a pulley over the top of it, and he would dip it down into the water some 20 or 30 feet, and he would pull it up and he would dip in there and would get a cold drink of water, and he drank out of this. And then you know what would happen after that?
What?
He'd pass it on to you because he didn't have a silo cup to at that particular time. He didn't have one of the disposable plastic cups, and so if he would pass it right along to you, and diversity there, and he was white or you were black, it didn't make any difference. He wanted you to have a drink of water, and of course I've seen it so many other times in another.
And it goes down 20 feet out.
30, 40 feet. Some of those cases, the wells were dug.
The bucket goes down that far.
Well, you have a winch at the top of the well, a bracket that is made with a pulley and a chain, and you would.
So you don't have to purify the water because it's already pure when it goes that far down, right?
Well, I wouldn't say that.
Like spring water.
Spring water is not necessarily pure water.
But we buy it at the store.
Well, we don't. Very often we don't have any idea what it is that we are drinking. You're just paying for it and bringing it home.
But it's the same kind of water where you go way down, right? In a sense.
Advertised as such very, very often. Whether that is the case, that is argumentative. It's argumentative, whether that's the case. But we buy a lot of water now, and for reason, and for good reason in many instances.
Did that have a name?
This is just a primitive. This is a primitive piece. This piece is a primitive piece because it was made for the farm. It was made for local usage, and this is what they had to use towards survival. They didn't have the Walmarts, the big box stores, and that sort of thing back then. Didn't need them. They had to do with what was. God made and nature made the stick. They purchased the coffee, and this made a dipper, D-I-P-P-E-R. This was a dipper.
I've heard of a dipper.
Used many, many, many times here about shifting. This is from our family, from one of the rural cemeteries, from our family cemetery, Coley Cemetery here. You might have seen some of these.
What is it made of?
This is metal, made of tin.
Okay.
And this was originally supported on a staff that stuck into the ground, and it's a grave marker.
Is there periwinkle, the kind that you have periwinkle that helps to identify the grave? Have you ever heard of the periwinkle that was a grave marker? And the flower would let you know where a person was buried?
The cemetery that I've heard of periwinkle, I know as a plant, as a flower.
Yes.
Okay, now, but the area that I came from, the cemetery, the family cemetery we have there, it was one that was granted to 17 devoted servants of the
Coley family.
Of the property owner or a descendant of the slave owner, the plantation owner. But here,
the plantation name was Coley as well, wasn't it?
Yes, ma'am.
And he named his slaves. He gave his slaves his name Coley as well, right?
The Coleys. My name is a slave name.
Okay.
In essence, my name is considered what would be said as a slave name.
Okay.
Yes. But there's a lot of history, and there is a lot of pride that is in fact associated with the Coleys. There's a lot here. As a matter of fact, to that end here, Mr. Sterling, this piece here, as a matter of fact, you see North Carolina Mutual Insurance Company. You see there. I don't know if you
was Mr. Sterling a white man?
Mr. Sterling. No, Mr. Sterling was from the Durham, Winston.
Oh yeah, I know.
Sterling, North Carolina Mutual Insurance.
Yes.
One of the first African American insurance company
in North
Carolina here. Yes, and it's just kind of odd again that we were talking. The conversation comes to this.
Is it
a medallion? This is a medallion.
Oh, I thought it was money.
It's an advertising
like a 50-cent
item.
piece.
Well, yes, it was used before television and before radio. It was just a big thing to do. Everybody wanted to get their name and their product out there, the mention of their product out there. But this is you see here, this is the Sphinx of Giza there. Mm-hmm. And it reads North Carolina Mutual Life Insurance Company, as durable as the Sphinx. And then to the backside of it, it has here.
If he sold that to someone,
they didn't sell these. They did not sell these. These items were many of these items here were
given.
They were advertising. They were advertisements. They didn't have television then. that did not have radio, what they did, they gave items as such to individuals so that they would carry the message of their company or the purpose of their company wherever they went. This was generally put onto a key, was added onto maybe a key. For instance, if you had your
I never seen it. I never seen it. I heard of North Carolina Mutual before. I never seen or even heard of that.
North Carolina Mutual is a insurance company is a very, very important North Carolina icon. Yes, ma'am. Very, very much so. And for the Charlotte-Mecklenburg area, very, very important for the Charlotte-Mecklenburg area also. Yes, but let me not. It doesn't take much to get me off course when I start to talk about old things. We start talking about our old ways. This item, a poker. This is called a poker. Mm-hmm. This is a handmade item from a rod by the farmers very often in the area of Wayne County and also in Charlotte-Mecklenburg and across the world. This was used to reach into the fire, and to pull a burning ember or a live coal being a coal that is fired, hot, burning, red.
Fireplace.
Yes, ma'am. To put it at a particular location, if you were cooking over an open fire, to move the log or the ember to another location so that your food wouldn't cook too fast or burn or that sort of thing. Also, these pieces were used to draw things near you. So hardly anything was made at that time with just one purpose. A poker. It's a poker.
Why? Look at this top of it where you hold your hand. Wouldn't your hand get hot? This is hot, and so.
No, because it has to. The heat has to come this direction, and then if your hand got hot, there were rags sufficient. You would use a rag that would insulate you from the burn. Similarly, and this piece was made by a blacksmith. My father, Isaac Coley, and a white gentleman in the area, Bob Davis. They were the farriers.
Bob Davis was the white man.
He was white, a very, very good friend of my father's. They are very likely to have made these two pieces. They are very likely to have made these two pieces, as I have seen them around. But
now, don't you see those two pieces, replicas of them today when people have things on their fireplace? They have fireplace sets that they purchase, and they're very similar. They've copied the same thing.
For memory, and a lot of time for reflective thought, they would buy things of this similar to these.
Artists, we want to thank you for being with us on Views with Joyce Waddell, as we've been talking to Frank Coley about the way things were and how things are today, and making comparisons as we reflect on our past, the wonderful history that we have. Tune in next week for another interesting program. We'll stay right here.